K-pop lovers. You're tuned in to K-pop Fair, where every story hits your heart like your favorite beat. The night unfurled like a cinematic overture, each light a note, each whisper a string, as the world's gaze fastened on a single figure stepping into the mythology of modern branding. Kim Taehyung, known to millions as V of BTS, arrived not merely as an artist but as a living symbol. An emblem that Coca-Cola, the most iconic beverage name on the planet, had chosen to crown its 2025 narrative. The announcement was more than marketing. It was theater, spectacle, and cultural alchemy, a merging of one of Korea's most magnetic stars with a brand synonymous with global rhythm. Inside Seoul's shimmering launch hall, glass and steel seemed to bend in reverence. The Coca-Cola red refracted across every surface like liquid fire. The atmosphere felt charged, almost orchestral, as if the crowd's anticipation had become its own symphony. Camera shudders as percussion, murmurs as violins, and the sudden hush before his entrance as the lingering silence between two notes. When Taehyung emerged, dressed in a tailored suit that balanced restraint and seduction, the entire space seemed to inhale at once. The jacket, cut with razor precision, carried a shade of midnight so deep it threatened to swallow light, accented only by a subtle scarlet lining that whispered of the brand he now embodied. His hair, styled in a languid wave, framed his face like an artist's brushstroke, an effortless rebellion against perfection, giving him the aura of both prince and poet. Every step he took down the illuminated runway was not merely walked, it was performed, choreographed by instinct, guided by gravity that seemed to shift toward him. The screens behind him flickered with montages of Coca-Cola's history. Norman Rockwell nostalgia, neon-soaked 1980s ads, the millennium's glittering pop culture, until it all melted into Taehyung's face, his silhouette redefining the century-old icon. The symbolism was deliberate. Coca-Cola, once a Western export of Americana, was now redrawing its identity with the grace of a Korean star whose influence stretched far beyond borders. Taehyung paused mid-stage, his expression a delicate tension between mystery and invitation, the kind of gaze that artists paint and empires build around. The world's media lenses strained to capture that exact frame, the curve of his lips, the angle of his jaw, the way his hand brushed the glass bottle he held as if it were both chalice and companion. Music swelled, an orchestral remix of Coca-Cola's classic, I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing. Infused with Korean instruments, the Gaegeum plucking like drops of light over the thunder of modern bass. The hall transformed into a cathedral of contrasts. Heritage and futurism, commercialism and artistry. Taehyung's very presence bridging them with a kind of sacred inevitability. As he raised the glass bottle, condensation glistening under the spotlight, the crowd erupted. Not in chaos, but in something closer to awe. The gesture was intimate, almost tender, as though he wasn't selling a product but inviting millions into a ritual of taste, memory, and dream. Every flashbulb, every gasp, every heartbeat in that hall was calibrated by the magnetism of a single man who made the act of drinking Coca-Cola feel like poetry. Beyond the stage, global reactions ignited like constellations across social media. Twitter trended instantly with hashtags marrying his name and the brand. Hashtag TaehyungX Coca-Cola, hashtag The Taste Off V, hashtag Coke Goes Global. Instagram feeds flooded with clips of his entrance, slowed down, replayed, reframed in black and white edits and adorned with fans' lyrical captions. TikTok became a frenzy of remixes, fans synchronizing dance challenges to the campaign soundtrack, their Coke bottles clinking like metronomes. Western media outlets hailed the partnership as a masterstroke, with the New York Times calling it a new epoch in the globalization of image. Korean press, meanwhile, dissected every detail of his wardrobe, from the cut of his trousers to the subtle rings on his fingers, symbols of understated rebellion. Fashion critics likened his presence to Yves Saint Laurent's muses. Elegant, untouchable, yet vulnerable enough to be unforgettable. Economists weighed in too, noting how one man's influence could potentially shift beverage sales across entire continents. But what struck deepest was not the commercial forecast, it was the cultural resonance. For decades, Coca-Cola had been shorthand for Western dominance, its red and white logo painted on billboards from Times Square to Timbuktu. Now, with Taehyung as its face, the narrative inverted. The East was not consuming the West, but redefining it, remixing it, breathing into it a new poetry. The symbolism was undeniable. Just as K-pop had conquered stages once closed to foreign voices, now its stars were anchoring legacies built in Atlanta, London, New York. Taehyung's ambassadorship was not about soda. It was about sovereignty, the quiet revolution of cultural ownership. And yet, amid all the analysis, what lingered most was the humanity of the moment. Fans described the light in his eyes, the softness of his smile, the way he leaned slightly as though listening to the invisible chorus of their cheers. In interviews after the reveal, Taehyung spoke sparingly, his words deliberate, almost musical. Coca-Cola has always been about connection, he said, his deep baritone carrying weight even in casual phrasing. When I hold this bottle, I don't just see a drink. I see memories, friends, family, moments of laughter. It was not a scripted line. It was an invocation, a rethreading of nostalgia through his own lens of intimacy. And with that, the brand was no longer selling sugar and fizz. It was selling belonging, carried by the voice of a man who could make silence sound like song. In the days that followed, the campaign unfurled globally. Billboards in Paris displayed Taehyung's silhouette against the Eiffel Tower, his hand outstretched with the bottle, the tagline, "Share the light." In Tokyo, subway stations played looping videos of him walking through neon alleys, Coca-Cola red glowing like lanterns guiding his way. In New York, Times Square's giant screen carried his gaze across thousands, his presence rivaling Broadway marquees. And in Seoul, buses and high-rises alike carried his face, not as an idol but as a myth already written into the city's veins. The campaign became omnipresent, inescapable, like oxygen with a hint of caramel sweetness. But what separated this partnership from others was the artistry embedded in its storytelling. Each advert was cinematic, shot with chiaroscuro lighting and frames that mirrored film noir romance. One spot showed Taehyung at a piano, fingers gliding over keys, a Coke bottle resting nearby, condensation marking time with each note. Another cast him in a desert, bottle in hand, as the sun dipped crimson, his silhouette a lone figure against eternity. These were not commercials. They were elegies, hymns to moments bottled and shared. And through them, Taehyung's artistry merged seamlessly with Coca-Cola's mythology. Critics called it liquid cinema, a campaign less about sales than about seizing the collective imagination. Even rival brands admitted quietly that Coca-Cola had rewritten the rulebook by anchoring itself to Taehyung's aura. Because unlike traditional ambassadors, Taehyung didn't merely endorse, he transformed, his presence turning commerce into art, product into poetry. He became the vessel through which Coca-Cola redefined its own story, a global ritual retold in the language of beauty. And in that sense, the partnership was not an endpoint, but a beginning. The beginning of a new kind of branding, where the boundary between celebrity and myth dissolved, where culture itself became the currency traded. For Taehyung, it was another chapter in a career already luminous, another canvas on which his artistry found unexpected expression. For Coca-Cola, it was rebirth, not as a nostalgic artifact of Americana, but as a universal emblem refracted through the prism of a Korean star's gaze. And for the world, it was proof that the future of influence, taste, and desire belonged not to borders, but to the individuals who could transcend them. As the campaign's closing montage played at the Seoul event, Taehyung's voice whispering, "Share the light," the audience did not simply applaud. They exhaled, as if collectively aware they had witnessed more than marketing, more than a brand deal. They had witnessed history written in velvet tones and carbonated spark, in elegance and intimacy, in the soft gravity of a man who makes even the simplest gesture unforgettable. Kim Taehyung and Coca-Cola had fused, not as product and promoter, but as story and storyteller, desire and destiny. And in that union, a century-old brand rediscovered its pulse, its poetry, its future. That's it from Kpop Fair, your ultimate K-pop destination. Remember, stay sparkling and always follow your heart. See you in the next video.